You two are going to help get the profession where it needs to be over the next many years, and keep this stuff up.
Beyond Clean offers a creative look into the inner workings of the healthcare industry committed to getting it right. Every instrument, every time. Join us every week as we explore the hidden world of one of the most important aspects of safe surgical care. And now your hosts, Hank Balch and Justin Poulin.
This week on Beyond Clean, we speak with Stephen Kovach, Director of Education at Healthmark Industries. He has been in the hospital field for over 37 years, and Stephen is active both on the state and national levels of various organizations, having held many positions. He is a voting member on various AMI committees and has a personal website where you can read many of his articles. That's cpdguy.net. He's authored chapters in both the Isham 7th edition technical manual and the management manual. He's very proud to say that he has worked in central service. Hank, this is somebody I would be surprised if any of our listeners aren't familiar with him, haven't been to his website, and I would say most likely they've seen him speak at some point during their career, unless they literally started 6 months ago.
Well, and if they have not, this is going to be a perfect opportunity for them to get introduced to the man, the myth, the legend, Stephen Kovach. But to be completely serious, he is one of those guys who carries passion with him in every education, every phone call, every email he sends. You can tell this is someone who cares about making this industry great and making the technicians in particular confident and competent in what they do. I cannot wait to hear what he has to say.
Well, what I love about how Stephen came to be our guest was that he was asking us how to listen to the show, and so we gave him instructions on how to download from iTunes, how to find us on LinkedIn. We're going to share that with you, the listener, right now, but it was very funny because then he expressed interest in coming on the show. It was definitely flattering that somebody with Stephen's cachet, I guess I'll say, was listening to our show before we had an opportunity to reach out to him and ask him to be a guest. So you can follow Beyond Clean on Twitter at Beyond Clean Info. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/Beyond Clean Podcast. The LinkedIn page, that's where we're housing most of the episodes. If you're looking for a place on the web, it's linkedin.com/company/Beyond Clean. And finally, if you would like to send us an email, maybe a question you'd like to see us answer on the show or any other general commentary, it's info@beyondclean.net. And now, after a short break, we'll be speaking with Stephen Kovach. Joining us now, Stephen Kovach, Director of Education at Healthmark Industries. Stephen, I really appreciate your early support of our show and definitely as coming on as a guest. Hank and I have been excited to get some more big names on the show, and you certainly are one, very recognizable in the industry.
Wow. Thank you very much for that introduction, Justin, and hopefully we'll see how the interview goes. Okay. Thank you very much, both of you, Hank and Justin. Looking forward to talking about the profession we all love.
It is a great profession, there's no doubt. And I figured we'd set the table. Maybe we let the listeners get to know you a little bit, how you became the CPD guy, talk about your healthcare experience before moving into an educator role. So maybe, I don't want to say start at the beginning, jump into the Wayback Machine and go to the very beginning, but what drew you to sterile processing and made it a profession that you love so much?
It was back in, I started in 75 as a sterilization orderly, but through that, it wasn't until about 1983, and I was working in the operating room as a perfusionist, and I wanted to get into management at Henry Ford Hospital at that time in Detroit, and they were going through some changes in what was called OR reprocessing. And my head nurse said, Steve, I think you would be great there. And I applied and got the job. And from that point on, I've been operating room sterile processing since about, I think it's 1984, right about there. And I haven't left the field since. And what really paid off is, I think this is important for everybody. Mentoring was very important, and I had some unbelievable mentors who helped me through my career that helped me get to where I'm at today. And that, I think, is key for who's ever in this field. We have to mentor others and find people who have a passion and keep that fire lit for them and help them move along in a career. And as we heard in some of your previous interviews, some people have used the job as a supervisor, manager to move into other areas of the hospital, and that's good. And so we need to do that. And that gets into, for me, how did I get to be this expert is I had a lady named Fran Cook who was my OR director, and she saw some potential in me. And from there, she taught me to think as a nurse. And Justin, as a nurse, I think you can appreciate this, that you look at a patient, you assess, plan, implement, and explain that patient in everything you do. And you've been taught that in nursing school. She taught me to look at the medical device as my patient, assess it, plan it, figure it out, something isn't working, and brought that critical thinking skill for me into my job. And we need to do that with our staff. And how do we do that? And that's something the nursing profession has done unbelievable with every good nurse. They know how to do that. And that's basic quality management. Focus, PDCA, or Deming. That's all what it's about. Our job is to make sure an item is clean and functional, and then it can be high-level disinfected or sterilized. And Hank, your department has a slogan or something in there about patient ready or something like that. What is your, don't you have a slogan in your department?
That's
Something
right.
like
We
that?
do. We use the hashtag surgery starts here in our department to keep that patient-centered focus and larger vision about what we're doing and how, really what we're getting prepared for, which is surgery, not just a complete sterile tray, but this tray is going somewhere and it's touching someone. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what it's about. So I had great mentors, and I hope you don't mind. I really want to mention some people, and some unfortunately are not around anymore or have dropped out of the profession. But I've been very blessed to have people teach me how to ask questions, to be professional. And some of them came from industry, and that's where I'm at now. I've gone to the dark side, as I jokingly say, is I had people from 3M, Janet Proust and others. Kimberly Clark helped me do things. How do you ask the right questions? And it's the inquisitiveness. We have to teach our staff to think and have critical thinking skills so they understand they are the profession. They are the expert. And then, of course, with the company I work with, you asked, how did I become the CPD guy? When I started with that, one of the Basiles, I think it was Ralph or Steven, says, well, do you want to go by Kovach at healthmark.info or whatever it was? And one says, you're the expert. And I says, well, I'll be the CPD guy. And that's just how it came. And so that was just put on my email and sort of gone from there. And it's just sort of stuck. But that's how that sort of came about. But again, it's very important for us to understand our role to help our staff do the best they can and to mentor them because they are experts. When you think about it, they know 3,000 different instruments, and that is unbelievable. And then how do we keep that fire going? And let them know professionally where they're at. So I had people who helped me along the way. And just as this broadcast, you're bringing in different people, hopefully it'll stir other people to help and share and network ideas so we can grow as a profession. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. I hope I've covered it.
No, that's great, Stephen. And I wanted to jump in a little bit on the mentor topic as you brought up Fran Cook, and it immediately brought to mind how transformative in my own career great mentors have been. And I every chance I get to talk about my mentor back in my early days in sterile processing, Karen Owens, who picked me up off the street as, one of those folks who knew nothing about sterile processing walking in. And then I ended up stumbling into a department, where Karen was the leader and, really was taught not only how to do the job, but how to be passionate about doing that job. And of course, she's one of the few folks out there with the Isham Fellowship and, really drove that passion and love and respect for certification in our field. And I know, just looking back on my short career, I would not be where I am today, and I would not have the vision that I have today if it wasn't for her taking the time to share that with not only me, but every team that has come through her leadership. So you're right. It can really change the direction not only of these individual leaders who grow up underneath that, but an entire industry. You've been around, since 1975, 1984, to which, that's the year I was born, by the way.
Okay.
So, there you go. Like, you've been doing this, ever since I was in diapers. Okay. But, to that, and I was talking to Justin a little bit before the show. I remember I got the job as a brand new technician. The first thing I did in the age of internet is I went online and I began Googling and searching and trying to find information about what I'm doing now, what I'm called to do. And I stumbled upon this website from the CPD Guy, and I could not have been more excited because here's this one place with all of these links and all these articles and all these resources in one singular website that I could go back to again and again and again. And I wouldn't meet you for many years later, but the impact, just on spending the time and the effort to get that together, it really impacted me. And I'm sure that it's done that a lot for folks around the industry. So, and asking about how you became the CPD Guy, I guess what drove you and what drove that passion to spend the time and effort to get those kinds of resources together?
Well, part of it was sort of, again, what you two guys are doing is there wasn't a lot out there. So I'm going to go back quickly to 1996 when I started my website. It was the second one, but the first one was our state group, the Michigan Society of Central Service Professionals. And there wasn't a lot going on. So I'm really going to date myself, Justin and Hank. There would be 7 or 8 of us. This was back with AOL Instant Messenger, and we would be instant messaging at 10, 11 o'clock at night. I was talking to one of my other mentors, Ray Tarasi or Dan Mayworm, who people might not even know who he is. He started the Journal of Healthcare Materials Management, and we'd be going back and forth. And I says, gosh, there's no place to put information. So I just bought a website and put it up there and started learning, and my kids started helping me put this stuff on the web. And I just wanted to share information. And now you can go anywhere and get it. But it's, again, I didn't find a place where I could find information. So I just started putting it up. And I just want to do this one brief thing. Back in the mid-90s, there was the talc issue on, can you sterilize talc or could you not? So myself and a friend, Brian Broder, who's not in the business anymore, and he was American Society president, we got some articles, we put it together, we put it up on my webpage so people could find out, could they sterilize talc, and do they have to have a dry heat sterilizer? So again, it was just a way to start sharing information, because back then it was pretty hard. You had to read a lot of books and find things. So again, it's the need for knowledge and trying to share it, because there's a saying, some people say knowledge is power, but I believe it's the sharing of knowledge that the real power, that's where it lies. You don't want to be that squirrel holding the nuts. You want to spread that information around as best you can. And so sort of dubbed. And the last thing is Karen Owens. I love her. I know her. We brought her into Detroit to speak, especially when she was doing all this loaners, and she had a great loaner policy. She's a great friend and also a mentor for me too in many ways. Unbelievable woman. I can't agree with you more there, Hank. So,
while we're sharing mentors, I'll tell you, mine was Rick Schultz. He gave me my first opportunity to move out of the nursing arena and go to the dark side, as you put it. And I've often used that quip as well, Stephen. I've gone to the dark side, And,
yes.
And I think if you've been a healthcare provider and made that leap, it's kind of, it's bittersweet at first, but I've enjoyed the flexibility, and there's a lot of things that I've enjoyed about my career. And Rick taught me also how to be an educator, and have done a lot of educations. He gave me an opportunity after the completion of my first year to speak at our vendor booth at AORN's annual conference, which was just a huge opportunity for me, a chance to kind of prove myself and put what I'd learned to the test, and in terms of my knowledge of the information and my mastery of it and my confidence to deliver that, which was, you need people that will empower you. And I cannot emphasize enough what you said about the real power comes in sharing of the knowledge. And I do want to go back as we close out segment 1 and just compliment you on the way that Crazy for Clean is set up, because not only is there real power in the sharing of knowledge, which that site certainly does, but also in having some fun with it. Because if you're going to get people to go and try to access those resources with the vision that you had back in 1996 to take that information and put it on a website and make it accessible, if you're going to have people go in on their own time and spend some energy getting CEUs, you want to make it fun. And the way you've designed the website, and I'll let you, talk about this before we end the segment, but the way you've designed the website is to make it engaging and make it fun. And I just think that's the best way to learn.
Well, thank you. So I'll close this out really, hopefully nicely. First, I want to thank HealthMark and the Basile family, who have allowed us, meaning them and our team, create this. And I want to tell you how this quickly came about. We had an unbelievable young man who worked in our warehouse who learned to write programs. We found this out. Ralph and I sat down. We says, how can we make this fun? So his name is Alex Kirk. He doesn't work for us anymore, but he went on to something else, and he's a programmer. We sat down and we said, we want to teach and do things. So his first 3 games were like video games. And then we got feedback back, and people were saying, it's a little too hard, make them matching. But we found out people wanted to have a little fun and learn. And I can tell you, we're coming up on 10 years, and I think we're close to 25,000 CEUs we've given out. So that's really to the company I work for. And I'm sure you can tell I have great respect in the people I work for, but they allowed this to take place on a different way to share information. And thank you for recognizing what we've done at HealthMark. That's very nice of you both, Hank and Justin. Thank you. I wanted Alex's name to get out there, so thanks.
Deservedly so. We're speaking with Stephen Kovach, Director of Education at HealthMark Industries. We'll be right back after a short break. Okay, Stephen, so as we kind of continue the discussion, one of the things that I think you've done a really nice job with as HealthMark really is enhanced visual inspection technologies. But first I want to set the table. I remember seeing the video early in my transition from nursing to my sales career, the NBC nightly news did a piece, and I think they did it in the morning show, and then they did a little bit longer one on the nightly news, but it highlighted dirty surgical instruments in the OR and specifically cited a case, I think it was from Texas, where a man had shoulder surgery, contaminated shaver had left him somewhat disabled because of the infection that ensued after the surgery. And this obviously raised a lot of awareness. I remember that pushing required certification at the state level, gave it a nice boost and pushed forward and raised maybe public awareness. But it also, behind the scenes for the technicians in the department, helped them realize or understand even more how many surfaces in an instrument we're not able to visualize and know for certain has been cleaned properly, as well as making sure that they're following the instructions for use and the proper technique. Can you maybe take that and lead us down a little bit of a background on the industry, some of the issues that you've seen over your career, and then tell us more about the benefits of enhanced visual inspection technologies?
Justin, thank you. That's an unbelievable lead-in, and I think what people need to remember, we're in 2017, and in 2009 is when the U.S., the FDA issued its alert that objects were being left, fragment tissues were left in shavers. And here we are to this day, and that's still happening. But what took place, and I call him sort of the father of enhanced visual inspection. His name is Jahan Azizi's. He was a BS CBET quality manager at the University of Michigan. They ended up writing a paper that was peer-reviewed in ARN called The Uphill Grind, Process Improvement in Surgical Instrument Cleaning. And I don't like to use the word I a lot, but myself and my two of the Basiles, we were with Jahan testing these instruments, and he was making a makeshift borescope looking into these instruments that weren't clean, and wrote a paper on it and started to figure out, what do we need to do? We have to look into these lumens, into the shaver, and so on. So he sort of helped Healthmark develop the product we have today, but he was the first one who really started looking into these and publishing papers and making the awareness, because the FDA said in 2009 that people should use a 3mm video scope to look into that. And then the FDA had their Clean Summit in 2011, and Smith & Nephew even did a study where they looked at 12 facilities, 78 devices, shavers, and found out that nobody was following the IFU, plus 95% of them were dirty, and it was inside the area that you couldn't see. Well, the ironic part is there's 8 or 9 different shaver companies, and not all of them have changed their IFUs. And we know that the inside of these shavers are dirty, and that is something that the message has to come out. It's not about buying somebody's product. It's about quality doesn't cost, it pays. You have to put quality in. You can't look in some of these areas with your naked eye or the unaided eye, so you have to enhance it. And that enhancement starts with a regular lighted magnifier at everybody's workstation. And now looking into some of these devices, but again, people have to remember, the shaver is the only device where the IFU mandates it. And if you're using shavers, you need to do that. There's been unbelievable research done by Corey Ofsted, where she is showing with the endoscopes and cystoscopes that there are irregularities in these, and we don't know why. And what is this? Is it water? Is it simethicone? What are these scratches? And she's using a flexible inspection scope, a borescope of high picture quality, looking and raising the question, what do we need to do? And so this has developed since roughly about 2009 to where it's at today. And there are many companies in this all trying to help people look where you cannot look with the unaided eye. So I tried to give a little background and give the man who he's also a friend, Mr. John Azizi, who really started to get people looking and writing some of the articles. So that's a little of the background on where it started and where we're at right now, Hank and Justin.
So, Stephen, this has been growing since 2009. We're 2017, 8 years later. If you were to walk into a sterile processing department in the U.S., what are the chances that you're going to see this type of enhanced visual inspection technology?
I'm going to say 30% or less. And the reason I feel comfortable with this, Hank, you've heard me speak, and I spoke in San Antonio at your first meeting. I put a survey out, and at the end of it, it asks some questions. It's not marketing, but it's to gauge where people are at. Right now, I have roughly 1,300 responses, and 75% of the people who've responded said they have an arthroscopy shaver. Barely 30% say they are using some type of enhanced visual inspection to look inside of that shaver. Now, again, it's slightly skewed because it's not a scientific study, and there could be 4 people from the same hospital filling it out. I don't have institutions, but the number is there that people are not following this IFU, and this is very important. The IFU is what's been validated, no matter what the device is, by the medical device company. And it is up to every department to follow that IFU. If you do not, and this is my opinion, you take on the legal responsibility of saying the way you're doing it is better than the company. You are going to be in trouble. So, yes, we know there's a design issue. And the companies are trying to change its design issues with many devices. But again, this specific device was linked to infections. People need to be looking and making sure that there's no debris. And here's the other key point. When they read the IFU, many of these devices require specific brushes or equivalent brushes, and they don't have them. Or they do what I call as a baptism. To clean the shaver might take 3 to 5 minutes, but they'll soak, dunk, boop, boop, brush it, and they're done. Well, wait a minute. That's not what's supposed to happen. So following that IFU is key to getting a clean and functional instrument. And then that visual inspection allows you to say, if it's dirty, send it back. Let's re-clean it. Let's see what we're doing. Improve our process. So I'm sorry to go on and on.
No, that's really good. And I think you make a great point that we're going to dive into further in segment 3, which is around that legal responsibility and following the instructions for use. And I think we can discuss a case where, that legal responsibility can be reduced greatly from the manufacturer if the facility makes itself vulnerable by not following the IFU. At the same time, staying on this topic around cleanability of these devices and writing that technology as part of the inspection process into the instructions for use, how has this technology increased awareness for companies designing instruments and having a much clearer focus on cleaning in mind? Because let's take just a simple one, the Yankauer suction tube. This is one that is hollow, but the lumen or the cannula going through the suction tube is not uniform in diameter. There really is no reasonable way to believe that you could get a brush inside of the classic style Yankauer and have it all clean. And yet, despite the fact that I believe they cut one open in that NBC Nightly News and just show all of the debris that continues to build up on those inner walls, despite that, I know for a fact that there are plenty of Yankauer suction tubes still in play in, the OR and running through the sterile processing department across the country every single day. And yet they literally cut one open and said, this is something that can't be cleaned. So maybe you want to speak to that specifically.
Sure.
From a broader perspective. Do you think that this technology has helped push manufacturers even more in the right direction with placing a focus on cleaning?
Yes. Let me do the Yankauer and then about the manufacturers. The answer to the Yankauer suction has been around since the 80s. Buy the disposable one-time use, get rid of it. So the Yankauer suction should be gone and go to the single-use plastic disposable, and that should be gone and not in any department. Why people don't do it, I have no idea. Landfill or whatever should outweigh of going to a product will be clean and functional and sterile every time. Yes, has this inspection helped? I can only tell you our company has sold some of our inspection scopes to medical device companies. So I know they are looking what they're making and what they're doing, and the awareness of the design factor over the last 7-8 years. If you talk to some people, and a good one would be Dr. Rod Parker from Stryker, to get him on here, they are working with sterile processing professionals, not only with the physician, but how do we take it apart? How do we clean it? What do we do? And the other thing that has changed, Hank and Justin, in 2015, on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, the FDA put out their new labeling law or act. It hadn't been updated since 1996. And between 96 and 2015, sterile processing professionals were saying, oh, the IFU doesn't give me instructions. They don't do this, or they don't tell me the brush, or whatever. Well, the new document says they've got to be very specific. And so you put that with this goal of where do I look? How do I look in these dead ends and lumens? How do I design it better? How do I take it apart? All that is playing into maybe more complex IFUs, but a device that can be clean and functional and high-level disinfected and sterilized. And I think it's one of the pieces, Justin and Hank, that this enhanced visual inspection has raised the awareness of, oh my gosh, what's going on? How do we fix this? How do we clean it? How do we design it better? How do we put different material in there? So yes, it is playing a part. One of the pieces. How much a percentage, I don't know, but it is playing a piece in what's going on.
So, Stephen, one of the things that we like to do on shows in particular that are talking about technologies is answer the question for the folks in facilities who say, maybe they had not heard about the challenges to processing these shavers before, or maybe they have and they've just have not been able to justify that argument to administrators to get these enhanced technologies in their department. How would you encourage them? What ideas would you give them to make
certainly
the point that quality doesn't cost, it pays?
It's very easy, Hank, and as a director, you know it. Two of your best friends are infection control and risk management. The one thing that Joint Commission is focusing on is IFUs. You now have an IFU that states you need to inspect this device. So risk management and the infection control person need to get involved to say, help me justify as I go through this. Do you want our hospital to take on the risk of not following the IFU appropriately? If they say, oh, you don't need this, and an infection comes about, you will have a problem. They understand it from a risk analysis. And also the staff, the manager needs to do it from a risk analysis. What happens if I don't inspect it? What if there's something left in there? That is the way to look at it, is The tools that I need to properly function within my department are outlined in the instructions for use. One of those tools are a boroscope or a videoscope or whatever the terminology is. For me to make sure this device is clean and functional and to be used on you, Mr. CEO, I need to do that. Would you want me not to follow the IFU? And if they say no, well, then you might want to leave. If they say yes, and it has to be from that point of view. These are the tools I need, the tools of my trade. If you don't supply them to me, I can't do my job, and you don't want me not to do my job. That's the approach I would take.
I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish.
And then you just look at the different vendors, pick out who's got the best product, support. Then you go through that RFP process, and then you pick what's right, and you go from there. I'm sorry, Justin. That's what I wanted to finish.
No, that's perfect. And what I was going to say is it segues greatly, because essentially what you're saying is you're offloading the liability if you're not going to follow the instructions for use. And we're going to get into that in segment 3, because it's a very important aspect to, if you're going to say that, do you not want me to follow the instructions for use to make sure that the instrument is safe and clean, and, you know, that I'm following the instructions for use from the manufacturer? They obviously can't say no. They can't say no, don't follow it. They have to say yes, which means you need the tool. But ultimately, if you didn't have the tool, let's say they said yes, but they never approved the budget, right? If you don't have the tool, and then it comes down to an infection and there is a lawsuit, ultimately the hospital is going to have a much greater, if not all, accountability in that scenario. So we'll get back to that, or we'll engage that discussion after a short break. We'll be right back after this. Stephen, we talked in actually both the first and the second segment about legal responsibility, following instructions for use. I don't think anything has gotten more publicity in the last several years than the issues with the duodenoscopes and CRE infection across the country. And I thought this would be a great opportunity for us to sit down and talk about the cleanability, following those instructions for use, etc., and specifically maybe how some of the legal action has fallen towards the hospital versus the manufacturer, and how do institutions protect themselves?
That is key, and I think as sterile processing professionals, I think they need to understand the ramifications of their job and not doing what they're supposed to do. Myself, as I work in a hospital, unfortunately, I was involved in a few depositions. Now, true, they were back in the 90s and that, but one of the facilities I worked at, they settled out of court because that way it would be kept closed. And I look back now on some of the things that took place. We weren't doing what we were supposed to do, and it was being pointed out even back then. And now we are with the duodenoscopes and the death, and we talk about the shavers and those legal responsibilities. And there's also the one which many of you might not remember, almost 15 years ago, down at a prestigious hospital in South Carolina, or North Carolina, or one of the Carolinas, they used elevator fluid for many months in their automated washer to clean the instrument, and the legal lawsuits that came from that. So there are a lot out there, but the one that's highlighted, and I hope people will go look because this is all on the internet. I will not name hospitals or whatever or companies, but there recently was a jury awarded over a death, unfortunately, of a patient. And the hospital was fined or had to pay the family $1 million. And why was that? I'm going to read real quick. Was the facility negligent? The jury said yes. Was the negligence a cause for injury or damage to the plaintiff? Yes, it went through. And so here, as the jury heard what was going on, and they heard the facts that this facility did not follow the IFU of the manufacturer, they used a water pick and toothpicks and brushes that weren't supposed to be used to clean the device. It's all in the legal case, and that hospital had to pay $1 million. And they were part of a lawsuit against the manufacturer of the scope, and they still had to pay. But here is a prime example of people not following the IFU, and here is another key question. Did one or more of the companies fail to provide adequate warning or instructions for use on the scope at the time of manufacture? And it was checked no by the jury. So they're telling them that they got the right information. They were responsible too because they didn't do what they were supposed to do, follow the IFU. That is some powerful information, and this gets back into segment 2. As you meet with risk management, they don't want you not to follow and do what you're supposed to do, because if you don't, this could be an outcome, and then you're in the paper, and then you can lose bond ratings, and people aren't going to go to your hospital. It is a pyramid effect. So anyways, that's the example I'd like to share on the importance of following the IFU and the implications if you don't follow it. Your guys' thoughts on the example I've given. What do you guys think?
No, Stephen, that's so true. I was actually sitting this afternoon in a webinar hearing a little bit about the proposed rule for CMS in relation to the accrediting organizations that work with them, that was posing the question, should those accrediting agencies make their findings public under the vision, for more transparency? And I bring that up because the case that you're talking about was a jury trial. So 12 ordinary citizens sitting here hearing all the details that are kind of the everyday of our lives. We know we're in the industry, we're in these departments, so we know the difficulties to follow the 128 steps to properly process some of these scopes. We understand the challenges, but many in the public do not. And it's so interesting to hear how this jury responded once they were confronted with the facts and they saw the manufacturer's instructions. They heard how the hospital and facility responded and reacted to those kinds of things. And so going back to the CMS, proposed rule for transparency, et cetera, as those things grow and as the push for public knowledge grows, I just see this entire question becoming bigger and bigger because it's, then it becomes not just horrible incidences that we have, where someone loses life or goes through massive pain and suffering. But now it's just, how did you do on your survey? And did they have some findings there that they relate to infection control practices? And if you've been in the industry long enough, those surveys, oftentimes there are findings, and oftentimes the public is not aware. And there's nothing out there that would signal that there's problems at this facility. But if some of these rules go through, that could change. Yes,
yeah. And this gets into the whole inspection of devices and things like that. Is a company trying to sell you the TheraBand to test your scissors? Well, think about it. Or even simple magnification. In the IFU, it says inspect for functionality. So what are the things you must check for? Or visually inspect. People need to think about if you're a cardiac surgeon using some Castro Viejos, he's using loops with 6, 8, or 10x magnification, and you're not even looking at the tips of that scissor under a 2 or 4x bench magnifier, and you're just looking and say it's there, and he looks under it and he sees a little nick and burr, and he's cutting that carotid vein or that lima or something in the open heart or whatever, and he gets a snag on it, that can cause a problem. So that's the whole thing. Do you have the tools, and are you following everything? And how do you put it on your electronic record that you've actually inspected it or you've done it? The other downside is a technician could just press yes, 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 and not do it. But again, if it's not documented, it's not done, but they can have a way to do it. So this whole inspection process and testing is all very important and is a step that many, I think, are missing or aren't doing, and they need to do it. And I've been nice enough to been in your department for a brief view, and I know you've got TheraBand, you've got it hanging there, and they got little snips in it, and you go to other places and they don't have it. And why is that? Why can one hospital do it and the other can't? And it's what tools are needed, and how do you train your staff? And maybe your staff takes longer to assemble a tray, and your benchmarking might be off, but you're doing it the right way, and the other people aren't. So it's a pot of stew out there that has so many different pieces to the puzzle. That puzzle, how do they all fit in? And those are the challenges, following the IFU and having the staff and somebody telling you your benchmarking's not compared to somebody else, but are they doing it the same way? So getting data and that to help support you is very, very important. And those are some of the challenges that I think, Hank, you and others, as you navigate, and some of your earlier guests, you had Michael down in Arkansas, up in the Dakotas, you had another person talking who are working there day to day and facing these challenges. How do you do it and do it correctly?
That's right, Stephen. And the encouragement that I like to give, particularly to sterile processing leadership and upline administration from there, it is our responsibility as managers and directors, administrators, OR directors. We have got to give our frontline technicians the tools they need to do the job. If it's visual inspection technologies, all the way down to the correct brushes to do the job. Not just some brushes, not just any brushes, but the specific variations of brushes that are necessary to get compliance, but ultimately compliance, it's not compliance for compliance sake, it's compliance because there's patients at the other end of these instruments. And on the point of benchmarking, I get asked that question a lot from folks around the industry is, what should we be doing? How fast should we be going? What should our error rates be? Those kinds of questions. And obviously for the error rates, that's a little easier to answer. But in terms of productivity, the question you always have to go back to is, it does you no good to go faster if you don't have the quality there to begin with. But on the other side, we should be training and equipping our teams to be able to produce at a good rate, because there's not just one surgery tomorrow, there's 80 surgeries tomorrow, and they all need their equipment, and you can't spend inordinate and wasteful amounts of time inspecting. But if you have the proper tools, the proper training, support from administration to say, you go at the speed that you need to go to get the job done correctly, that's what we need. But it does start at the top. Even if these technicians wanted to do the right thing, they can't because they don't have the tools to do it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Hank. Is CS Week is just passed, and I hope people did something during that week, but they take it and make almost every week CS Week. And if they've gotten their CEO or somebody else to come down, and how do you start bridging that gap and getting people to work together and know the importance of this department and what they do, and getting an MRI is just as important as getting you 5 new Sonics, or as we heard with Tom from Ultra Clean talking about the importance of sonic cleaning, and having one might not be enough. If you got 5 washers, you might need 5 sonics to do the throughput or whatever. But again, it's so important to get the right tools and get the right training. And that leads, you said, a little on certification. I mean, certification is the minimum part, and it doesn't mean, and Justin, please don't take this wrong, I know you're a nurse, just having an RN's degree doesn't mean you're a great nurse, but it means you got the knowledge to practice. And same with sterile processing professionals. That's the minimum we need to do. And then we have to ask the right questions and interview to get the right person who's going to work as a team and apply that knowledge correctly when we give them the tools. So it all these pieces get into, doesn't matter whether it's visual inspection or benchmarking, we got to get the right people with the right tools and the right team. And as we've talked, it's not easy putting them all together, and sometimes that one puzzle piece isn't there, and you got to work to get it in. So
you're absolutely right, though.
AD.
Yeah, I don't take any offense to that. You're getting a baseline knowledge and understanding that makes you capable of doing any job. And actually, a couple weeks ago, we spoke with Daniel Kuhl, and we talked about the apprenticeship program in the UK for engineers going and manufacturing instruments. And I was asking, is there engineering programs specific to surgical instruments? And that's not the case. But the fact that they would then go to a manufacturer and apply the skills that they've learned still requires, and I know we want to go back to this topic before we close, it still goes to mentorship or apprenticeship. Somebody has to give you the building blocks to come up and build a full house. You have the foundation, either in certification, training, bachelor's degree, whatever it is, that gives you the baseline or the foundation, but you still have to build the house. That comes from great mentorship. And I think also there's strength in numbers. So we talk about involvement in ISHM chapters where everybody supports each other. And I know this was a topic we really wanted to hit. I'll share an example from a different organization that I'm an education chair for, which is ARM, which is for Supply Chain Materials Management. And one of the things that our chapter recently did is we created a success stories meeting once a year where local supply chain or materials managers would come and share one of their successes. We'd take 3 20-minute presentations, and we wound up giving somebody the one of the 3. We drew names out of a hat, and they were sent to the national conference for a full ride, their registration fee, hotel, etc. And so that was a great way to pull people out, but we'd had a problem with the chapter being about, attendance-wise, about 70% vendors and 30% healthcare providers. It would waver a little bit, but we started the second year, we got all these success stories. We wound up having so many submissions that we had to push some off to our fall program, and I'm happy to say that in our September meeting, we wound up getting more healthcare than we did vendors for the first time in quite some time, and it had to do with the fact, I believe, that we had local people presenting. And I know you had said during one of the breaks in between the segments that you felt like we needed to see or mentor more of our peers and through these professional organizations to give local supply chain technicians, leaders, managers, etc., the opportunity to come and practice their presentation skills to raise the voice of sterile processing and sterile processing needs throughout the industry.
Yeah, Justin, that is a great example. And this goes back many years. Our Michigan Society, what we used to do as board members, and that we would actually, a board member who had never presented before would have the ability to present a half-hour topic at our state local meeting or the local chapter meeting, because as a technician or even if they were a supervisor, they're in the trenches and they could share the story. Then that stimulated more questions and networking. Well, we do it this way. We do it that way. What? Oh, you know what? We drew a line 18 inches from the ceiling and nothing ever would go over it. And somebody says, wow, that's a great thing. Because I remember a lady named Bonnie Dibble talking about sterile storage. She'd never done it before. And we have to mentor and get the people out there. And when they start sharing the stories, we don't reinvent the wheel anymore. And then you get the local people that are going to, I believe they'll come more to the chapters and come to these meetings, and then they'll go out and spread the word and say, I presented, and why don't you talk about how you clean this instrument or whatever it is. And now you're maybe more will volunteer and go from there. And it's just really, really important for us to do that. And to sort of end up on a couple quick things here, I mentioned a couple people as mentors, and I want to close on a couple here. One is my friend, Miss Ann Cofield, who unfortunately is in her 80s and has dementia, but she was one of Isham's early members at Amy in the 90s, and later was a mentor for Sue Klasik, who now is an Isham rep. But Ann would be there fighting every day, and I could call her. She worked in Philadelphia. And the other one is my dear friend, Mr. Ray Tarasi, who he's way older than I am, but he was always there for me to call up and say, Ray, how do you do this? And a lot of others that were out there. And we need to do that. Don't be scared to say you don't know. Ask the questions, and you'll get the answers. And the other one is the company I work for, the Basile family. And guys, I'm sorry if this is a plug. It's a plug, but they allow us to educate, and that's our function, to talk about it and to try to help bring people along. And the Basile I report to all three of them, Mark, Ralph, and Steve, but basically Ralph has taken upon himself to work with ASTM. And one of the things, we don't sell detergents, but there's a working group. When you go buy detergents, there's no standard that you can compare one to another. The FDA's involved, the major detergent people, they're trying to come up with a standard. So if you're buying detergent A, detergent B, and detergent C, you now will have some real data that you can compare and see how is it clean and so on. And the same thing with brushes. ASTM is doing a lot of testing on how do you prove a brush is equivalent. And the people I work for, we're trying to help get this out there. So when companies and staff go, we have data to help make things better. So I have my mentor, which is my own boss, and the people at work who have helped me get my profession better and do things. And without them, I wouldn't be able to go out and talk and do things like that, and for you guys to interview me. And I can't thank you enough for allowing me to come on and just talk. This has been a lot of fun, guys, I want to tell you. So thank you very much. That's about it. I'll be quiet now.
The pleasure is ours. And I just wanted to thank you for encouraging us in this early effort. I wanted to thank you for being a loyal listener. You did tell us that you'd listened to a number of the episodes, but you also referenced them. So you didn't just play them, you really listened to them. And so thank you for that. And then thank you for being just an excellent guest and for all the work that you've done in the industry to help promote the issues that face sterile processing every day, that needed a voice for all of these years. And you've really, I know that voice is getting stronger, and that you've been a big part of that, Stephen.
Well, thank you very much, Justin. And Hank, you know how I feel about you, my friend. You're a great guy, and you're making changes, and you two are going to help get the profession where it needs to be over the next many years. And keep this stuff up, guys. Please do. Okay?
All right. That was Stephen Kovach, Director of Education at Healthmark Industries. And Hank, I really enjoyed his insights. He's obviously had years of experience in the industry, and he's seen what I would say is probably some very similar topics come and go, the themes, right? There's been advancements along the way, but he even mentioned something from back in 1993, I think he said, where similar challenges to the industry still existed. So while he's seen a lot of positive changes in the industry, I think he still sees some very basic, I don't want to say rudimentary, but some very basic themes that continue to play out.
No, that's exactly right. And we heard a little bit today why he is known as the CPD guy, not just because of his vast experience, but in particular that perspective on the frontline staff, what they need to do their jobs, what leaders and facilities are responsible for to make sure that they have that available to them. And I'm sure the listeners could just hear the passion coming out, and how he's speaking about his vision for education and his vision for equipping these folks to do the right thing every time. Just a wonderful interview, and so glad that we got to spend some time with him.
I think the one thing that really hit home, at least as far as paralleling what we're trying to accomplish with Beyond Clean, and I can't say enough, the listeners did not hear before and after recording just how encouraging he was of this effort, and drawing that parallel back to him talking about AOL and Instant Messenger. There was a dialogue and a conversation going on, but there really weren't a lot of easy to access resources. And so as soon as he could develop a website, he began doing so that information could be accessed. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what we hope to accomplish from the show. So maybe we'll get mentorship, another strong theme in this interview, from Stephen himself as we continue to grow this product and generate more listeners for the show.
It's true, and Tez has experienced a lot of industries. We are standing on the shoulders of giants. There are plenty of folks who have come before us in different avenues and different technology and media to get the word out, to get education out, to get collaboration brewing across the industry. So it was cool to see, to hear how that has progressed, from you have to find the book to you have to find the website and the forum to now you can listen in the comfort of your home or your car on the way into work or the way home. As technology changes, it's been a blast to be on the cutting edge of continuing that push for sterile processing, knowledge, and education.
I think finally it can never be emphasized enough to follow those instructions for use. It almost seems like a sterile processing cliche these days. What a CEU approved program have you not had your staff be told, follow the instructions for use? But I think there's some things that people may not be aware of being written into the instructions for use, specifically as Stephen cited with the shavers. But I think also, I'm not sure everybody really understands the legal implications, and I thought that might be eye-opening for many people tuning into the show.
That's right, especially for folks who are listening who may not have experienced some of those major quality breakdowns that some of these facilities have across the country. It's real. It's easy to forget as a frontline technician that not only are there patients at the other end, but oftentimes there's attorneys at the other end as well, and they're going to be coming back through that documentation, and they're going to be asking questions about how you did it, why you did you document it, and were you competent? So a very engaging topic there, and hopefully one that will change the attitudes and the actions of folks on the front line.
Well, he's done it before, and he'll do it again, I'm sure. That's going to be a wrap for this week's show. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd appreciate a rating and a review because your feedback is important to the show. On behalf of Hank and myself, thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond Clean.